Hi, I'm Laura Hendricks. I am the State Specialist in Family and Consumer Economics at the University of Arkansas Division of Agriculture Cooperative Extension Service. And I have the pleasure of organizing webinars for the Financial Security of All Community of Practice for 2017. And so glad you could join us for this first one. I'm delighted that Billy Hensley was able to present today. Many of you may know him from AFCPE or other conferences or events that we've been to. Billy is with National Endowment for Financial Education, and his title is Senior Director of Education. And so he's going to give us a research update today. Billy also is involved in grant making, research, the College Web and Consumer Education programs, of the educational portion of NEFE, those resources that we all use. And this is a little tip I didn't know about Billy. Billy is also adjunct faculty with the College of Education and Human Development at the University of Louisville. So glad to have Billy here today presenting for us this update on NEFE research. Thanks, Billy.
Good morning. Thank you, Laura. I really appreciate the invitation. I'm very humbled by the invitation and love all of my friends at Extension. I've gotten to know so many of you over the years, and several of you, actually a few of you who are on the call today, are some of the first people I met when I came to NEFE. So, you know, it's been great getting to know the work you do at Extension and sharing with you what we do at NEFE. I'm going to open my screen here and so that I can walk us through the presentation. A couple of quick apologies and caveats for anyone who is getting major head glare here. I apologize for that. I bid you good morning from Denver. I'm in the office today, and it was a balmy 10 degrees when I walked down to the office this morning, and hopefully it's warmer where you are. I know it's warmer where Barb O'Neill is because she said she was in Gainesville, Florida. But the point of my talk today is to give some updates on some projects that we have funded at NEFE, some things that have just finished up that we're just starting to put on the website and just starting to disseminate. And then I want to give a quick overview of some things that we've currently got going that aren't quite finished or are finishing up in the next year or two. And so you can stay tuned to that. And then beyond that, I'll give you a real fast update on some things that are coming out that are new at NEFE, that are resources that are helpful, educational resources for you. Now, I know that everyone doesn't know who NEFE is, and I'm not going to belabor this point for those of you who have known NEFE longer than I have known NEFE. But just as real quick, we're a private operating foundation, and we're headquartered in Denver, but we do have a national focus in our work, and we were formed after the sale of the College for Financial Planning. So anyone who has the CFP's designation or is working on that right now or knows about that, that's where the CFP designation came from. And when the college and the property and the buildings and the intellectual property and all that were sold in the late 90s, that's where our endowment came from, and that's how we got started. But most of you know NEFE through our high school financial planning program that many of you use in your communities and in your schools, and that's how a lot of you know us, and that actually predates before NEFE was a separate organization. It was actually part of the College for Financial Planning's outreach efforts. So many of you have known us for many years because of that. The way we do our mission at NEFE is through education, through awareness, and through research. And we fund research. We do a lot of awareness campaigns, whether that be through media, national polls, things like that, and then our educational resources, of which you're probably most familiar. The reason we fund research, NEFE used to fund just regular grants, like programmatic type grants, several years ago, and we made the conscious effort to shift to just funding research because we felt that funding research would have broader implications for the field. And more specifically, in the last several years, we have been funding things that we see as either seminal in nature or the potential to shift dialogue or to really have a broad impact on the research literature or practice as well. So we have been working on that for several years, and many of you have seen some of the studies actually posted in journals over the years, and some of you have been involved in some of those studies. Some of those those of you in Extension who are either on the webinar today or who will be watching this at another time. So my effort today is to try to stay on agenda here, stay on track, and I apologize for trying to fit in so much into this presentation. I put more into the slides than I'll probably discuss thoroughly. And the reason I did that is so that you have access to the slides and can go to them as you need them without me having to actually talk through all of those. And then I will I'll show you where to find more in-depth information about any of these studies and about all the things that NEFE is funding as far as research is concerned. And then show you the sections of the NEFE website where you can get to those things. Because NEFE has a lot of programs, and sometimes it's not clear where you go to get the right kind of information, and hopefully by the end of the day, as far as research is concerned, you'll know exactly where to go and find that. The first study I'm going to talk about today, and again, I wanted to say that I've organized this in a way that you lead with talking points. I'm not going to inundate you with data and statistics. It's more takeaways, so that when you're doing your work, whether that be at a local, a regional, or a national level, you have strong data, some good talking points to support the need for your work or to support the impact of your work, either way, and thinking about that. And so some of these data will show you the need for your work and the need for what we're doing as a community within the confines of financial capability, financial education, and financial literacy, and then also support the impact that we're having. And I hope that's a good takeaway that you can have. The first study that we're going to do is the George Washington University. Several of you probably have met or have heard Anna Lusardi speak before, and we've given her a couple of grants in the last few years that have looked at millennials specifically, and looking at using either the PISA data or the financial capability study that FINRA funded, and looking at that. And this study, we titled it Overconfident and Underprepared in our dissemination documents, because that's sort of the dichotomy we found with millennials, is that they had a high confidence in what they knew or what they thought they knew, even though that was applied in a way that wasn't showing that level of confidence. The high confidence wasn't completely translating to the practice. And so this sense of disconnect between millennials and their money, and that's something we're seeing in data from multiple places. So let me go back. This study was originally funded from the 2012 data, and the 2015 data came out right at the end of this grant. So Anna and her team did actually an additional analysis. And so some of the statistics, or most of the statistics I'm going to show you here, are from the 2015 data that's a little more recent. And some of these talking points you may have already heard through either the media or through other venues, but just as a refresher, we have about 70% of millennials, and that's folks who were born between 1982 and 2000. And give or take a year or two, there's sort of discussion about what is the millennial generation, but that's how we're looking at it at NEFE. But about 70% have at least some sort of long-term debt, and then 34% have more than one source of outstanding long-term debt. They're also looking at their futures. They're dipping into retirement accounts at a pretty high rate. 23% of those with a self-directed retirement account either took a loan or made a hardship withdrawal in the last 12 months. Considering the percentages of people who are actually participating in some sort of self-funded retirement account, and then when you take that sort of small number and then you shrink that down to the people who actually have not touched their money, it's frightening in a way, and it helps us to think about our work in ways that we're educating people about the ramifications of what that looks like. About a quarter of those with a checking account had overdrawn their account in the prior 12 months, and then looking at college education is associated with higher levels of debt across all sources of long-term debt. That's not necessarily a bad thing, but it's, and we'll get into a little bit more of that in just a moment. But again, here's some talking points. When you're thinking about borrowing on assets, and I took these images and blew them up so they would be good size for the presentation. So they're a little bit blurry. I apologize for that. But in the main documents that I'll show you how to get to, they won't be blurry like this. But those, it looks at those who have a checking account and then those who actually had overdrawn. Again, there's several things here with owning a home, having a mortgage, retirement accounts, those that have a college degree, and then those that have an outstanding student loan. The thing that's really troubling to me when you're starting to think about student debt is the number of people who have student loans but did not finish college, or who are maybe several years out of college and still have significant college debt. So they didn't attain a degree that helps increase the salary to cover the debt. And even over the course of a lifetime, what that will actually mean for folks, that they're having to pay for an unrealized asset, if you will. Indicators of financial distress: almost a quarter owe more on their home than the home's worth. About a quarter, the same percent, has been late with mortgage payments. And then 26% have unpaid medical bills. And again, looking at this sense of like the snapshot of what's going on with millennials and then the folks that we're trying to educate, the people we're trying to reach, or the young people that we have captive audiences with right now that are in high school or college, to help them sort of think about these factors before they have access to debt and income and so forth. Here's the student loan debt by demographics. I thought that may be interesting for those of you who are doing maybe workshops and thinking about student debt and what's the appropriate loans and so forth to take. But those that have the student loan debt and is concerned about paying it off, it shrinks a little bit as the income goes up, but it's still a very large percentage of people. Even if you're making more than $75,000 a year, almost a third of those folks are concerned about their ability to pay that off and what that looks like in their overall scheme of their budget. Credit card use, this is again an indication of risky behaviors. 51% engaged in any form of expensive credit card behavior, and that includes cash advances, over the limit fees, late fees, and then maybe just doing the minimum payments. So you see 43% are only doing the minimum payments on credit card debt. This is another talking point that you may have seen come across popular media recently. This sense of how confident are you that you could come up with $2,000 if an unexpected need arose within the next month. Now this is $2,000 from any source, not just emergency savings, but a credit card, a friend, a family member, money that's hidden under the mattress. Just, can you come up with $2,000 in any way within 4 weeks? And only about half of the people that said that they are certain or probably could come up with that to cover some sort of issue or emergency. And then specifically thinking about literacy, and I have a link here to the questions that we are referring to here, but the percentage of millennials, the financial literacy of millennials, and the blue is those who got the questions correct, and then the orange is the don't know the right answer. Numeracy obviously had the highest percentage correct, and then that starts to shrink depending on the topic. The bond price, to be fair, I don't know if a lot of people would get that question, but it's a sense of being kind of fully financially literate. Only 23% answered the first three correctly, which are sort of the easier, more applied, quick thinking questions. Only 7% answered all five correct. So of those who are highly financially literate, only 7% of millennials can be categorized that way based on this survey. Now, there are other surveys out there that measure literacy in different ways, and I definitely concede to that. This isn't the only way to measure literacy, but it's one way that measures literacy. And then 75% have this high self-assessed financial knowledge. So they gave themselves like a high score that they are financially literate and they know this stuff, 75%, but only 23% got 3 out of 5 correct, and only 7 again got all right. So this disconnect that I mentioned in the beginning, the high confidence versus the actual ability when this is applied, is a little troubling. For anyone who's interested, the link for the 5-question financial literacy assessment if you're going to do any kind of pre and post or any literacy assessments locally to help you target and focus programming. This is the link to those 5 questions if you wanted to use those. And then this determines financial capability. It includes things like literacy, education, and the ability to deal with income shocks. And again, only 22% of millennials have received some form of financial education. So when you start thinking about financial literacy and financial education, there's only a small percentage of people who have actually received some form of financial education, and whatever that actually is. We don't have a lot of information on what that actually looks like, but less than a quarter. And then when you see the statistics of people who get 3 of the 5 questions right or 7 right, you kind of see those links there and what that means. NEFE also does, moving on to the next study, we also do Harris polls, national polls, where we're curious in a question or a couple of questions about a particular topic. This is one that I thought your audience would be interested in. It was looking at technology, and NEFE did a story about this in our newsletter, the NEFE Digest. Many of you probably get the NEFE Digest, and we talked about this last year and what this looks like. But we surveyed a little over 2,000 people about using technology to set or achieve a goal, and especially where we're starting to think a lot more about how does technology influence our ability to think about financial decisions, setting goals, whether that be paying off debt or learning or whatever that is. About half or a little over half have used technology to set or achieve a goal. 3 in 10 have used a mobile app. A quarter have used social media. And then 1 in 5 have used a website or a gaming console. And an example of that would be that many of you may use is something like Fitbit or MyFitnessPal, and I actually have my Fitbit on right now, as you can see. So a lot of people are thinking about that for a sense of health wellness, and I think there's probably a trend to get to that place when it comes to financial literacy and financial wellness over time. But a majority of those who have used technology have done it for a weight or fitness goal, and then a third used it to change their diet. And I've actually used both of those myself to do the change diet and to achieve a fitness goal. And I think a lot of you probably have too. And then a third have used it to learn a new skill or refresh an existing skill. 37%. I think that's a pretty high number, personally, when you think about someone who wants to learn a skill and they're using technology to get to that point, whether that be apps or online courses or videos or prompts and so forth. And then a quarter used it to better manage their finances. So there's a lot of promise here. When NEFE will occasionally host focus groups. We do 1 or 2 of those a year with different audiences to get a sense for what people are thinking, what they need, and what they're looking for as far as educational materials and support materials and sort of general consumer education. And a lot of people cite things like Mint and some of those that they use to manage budgets. And then, they share what they don't like about those tools, and then they share what they do like about them. But I think we'll see this number continuing to increase over the years. Women are significantly more likely than men to have used technology to set and achieve a weight or fitness goal or change their diet. And then men are significantly more likely than women to use technology to learn a new skill. It's about 10% different on those. And then managing finances, it's about 9% difference. Another study that we have funded is, not knowing a whole lot about every individual state or every individual community's work on individual or direct programming, I thought it would be helpful to add this study as well. Early warning signs of impaired financial skills in older adults. There have been several studies that looked at what happens after you cognitively age or change, or what happens after fraud, for example, or if a loved one had been sort of taken advantage of by the latest scheme that's out there. We wanted to fund something that helped people think through how do you proactively prepare or think ahead for something like cognitive decline or just normal aging, as your brain ages normally, what happens and what to look for. And in this sense of helping people be proactive, helping them identify these things in their loved ones, or even in themselves, to think, what would be my plan if I started to make poor decisions based on my cognitive change and ability. And this is sort of normal aging, not Alzheimer's, not dementia, not some sort of illness-related cognitive change, but just kind of what happens to us as we get older. This was at the University of Alabama at Birmingham. Dan Marson was the principal investigator. And what they did is they had two subsets of a larger data set, and they used them for comparison. So these controlled normals, or people who have maintained cognitively normal throughout an annual visit for up to 7 years. And this was part of a broader study. And what the control group of that study ended up being the test group of this study, which was a fascinating way to use data, I thought. And then the control decliners, those who were cognitively normal at the beginning and then began to change over time. And so what came out of this is that I started looking at these specific financial cognitive impairment domains and tasks and what those looked like. And you see I've got those listed here. I'm not going to read them, but you can see they're very general things like monetary skills, cash transactions, paying bills, investing and decision-making, and so forth. And what came out of that was this test item where they were able to actually assess folks in an observed environment when they were doing things like paying bills, balancing a checkbook, making a tip at a restaurant, making change for a vending machine, and so forth. And these became the specific tasks that measured these cognitive changes in the lives of the individuals involved. And the full study gets into the ages of the folks, but it was anywhere from 60 to mid-70s. And the average age, the mean, was around 68 to 70, depending on which group. But again, here are some of the early warning signs. And the question, to ask yourself or on behalf of those that you care about, or those as you're creating programs around aging, is the person taking longer to complete everyday financial tasks? So an example would be preparing bills for mailing, just regular financial tasks, completing a check and check register. A second warning sign question would be, is the person showing reduced visual attention to key details and facts in financial documents? Now, I'm not talking about the normal sort of distraction that we deal with if we're having a busy day, or if we've got a lot going on at work and we're kind of distracted and make mistakes. This is sort of a sustained application of this declining mental capacity and behavior. So, for example, what this would look like is you can't identify a bill that is overdue and that needs quick attention. You're not able to sort of be aware that that's a pressing issue. And the next question I should say is the person showing declines in everyday arithmetic skills related to his or her finances? So again, calculating a medical deductible, calculating a return on a specific investment option, making change for a vending machine. So this is not just major, like big financial decisions. This is, I want to get a soda out of the machine and I need 3 quarters and a nickel. And, getting to that point and what is going to create that right amount of change to get me the product that I need. Warning sign question number 4, is the person showing decreased understanding of financial concepts? Understanding what is a medical deductible? What does that mean? And, why do I have to pay this when, this should be covered, and so forth. Difficulty understanding key investment risk, explaining the quantity section of a check and what that looks like. And I apologize for going through this so quickly, but I wanted to give high level and then give you the opportunity to go deep as you want. And then, is the person having new difficulty identifying risks in an investment opportunity? So a key risk in an investment scenario, or emphasizing investment returns while overlooking risks. And so from that, we actually created this document called Early Warning Signs, the Impact of Aging on Financial Decision-Making. This can be actually downloaded from the NEFE website at the research section. But this is a good handout if you're doing workshops or if you're creating programming around aging and decision-making. This is a really good handout to be able to share with those who are thinking about this from a personal family level, but also those of you who are helping educate other educators and other community educators and so forth. And it identifies what we just kind of the questions we went through, but in a quick way to kind of go through these. And I think about this from a point of view of myself. If this starts to happen in my own life, do I have a plan to sort of hand over management of the checking account to someone else who maybe isn't having this problem? And thinking about, I want to decide how these things are happening. I don't want to be reactive to it. I want to go ahead and make the plan so that if this happens to me, then I have a plan in place to take that over. We have a couple of videos that sort of walk people through this. If I have time, I may go back to these videos, but there are links here to these in the PowerPoint slides, and I have sent those ahead of time so that you can get those. They're just on the NEFE YouTube channel if you wanted to go to it that way. But one of the videos is about helping families negotiating aging parents' finances, and the other one outlines the early warning signs of financial decline that I mentioned. And we used those videos as a means to help people kind of see what this looks like, or be able to articulate what is happening with them specifically. And the people in the videos are actually real people who are negotiating and dealing with these very issues. And they're not actors. So think about that as you're using it. Another study that just so happens to be another one from Anna Lusardi at George Washington University is looking at enhancing retirement savings with school-based financial education. They were using the PISA data, and for those of you who are not familiar, it's the Program for International Student Assessment, and the PISA has been around for many, many years, and it's mostly been in subjects like math, science, and so forth, but they added personal finance to this in 2012, and the U.S. participated. We also participated in 2015, and those data will be released in May of this year to see if there's been any changes. But we were able to get at some things that were fascinating to me. And when you're thinking about retirement, and this defines the levels of what is a level 1 of being financial literacy, financially literate versus level 5. And when we did that, we looked at these other countries who participated, and the U.S. is just below average here on this. We did a story about this in NEFE called Painfully Average, but it's looking at where we are compared to our peers. But something, when you're thinking about financial education and learning versus what our retirement system looks like in the U.S., something fascinating came out of these data. So for example, countries that have a low retirement income replacement rate, meaning, so the equivalent in the U.S. is Social Security. So this pension retirement replacement rate. And Social Security replaces anywhere from 30 to 40, 45% of your income, depending on how much money you make, basically. But I think the average is something about 35 to 40% of your income is replaced by Social Security. That is very low compared to other countries, and maybe very similar to considering other countries. The thing that came out of this, though, that was fascinating is that countries that have a low replacement rate, typically their citizens have a much higher financial literacy. And that being the assumption here is that your retirement income guarantee is lower, so you need to learn more yourself about how to prepare for retirement. How do you save more? What are the vehicles of doing that? And the assumption here is that you have higher financial literacy because you have to learn how to save, and you have to learn how to be more prepared in retirement. The opposite side of that is that countries that have a much higher retirement income replacement rate, in the 60, 70, 80% income replacement rate, have much lower financial literacy, meaning they don't have to learn as much about retirement and financial literacy in general, because when they retire, their income isn't going to drop very much. The problem is the U.S. bucked this trend. We have a low financial literacy and a low retirement replacement rate, unlike all of the other countries that have low literacy and high replacement versus, or low replacement and high literacy, we're low in both. And here's a chart that shows that with the income replacement rate. So countries that have a low literacy, like financial literacy, like Spain, Italy, have a very high income replacement rate, 80 to almost 90%. And then those countries that have a high financial literacy, like New Zealand, Poland, and Australia, have a low income replacement rate that's similar to the US. Except for us, we have low literacy and low income replacement rate, which pushes us to think through this sense of what does this actually mean and what are the implications from this based on the data. Meaning that it's extremely worrisome for us as individuals who receive less income in retirement and are less equipped to plan and invest successfully to cover that shortfall. This places an urgency on us, not that we all didn't have the urgency already about our work, but this sense of it's even more daunting when you think about what are our peers doing in other countries and what more do we need to be able to do. Here's some charts and data on the proficiency levels at the US compared to our OECD peers. And as you can see, we have a much higher percentage of our people who have lower levels of literacy versus our friends across the globe. And then we broke this out in socioeconomic index for each proficiency level. So those who have the lowest level of financial literacy also have a pretty low socioeconomic status in the US. And that probably doesn't surprise most of you. Some of the key findings from these data, and I didn't get to this a lot in the charts, but I'll show you how to find that in a moment. But parents' involvement affects student financial literacy. Students' performance is influenced by their school and teachers. And some of these things that we looked at, like homes that have large numbers of books, and these are all data that OECD collects. If you have a lot of books at home, if you have good schools, then you're going to have a higher literacy rate. And the assumption is that your schools are offering more comprehensive issues, or maybe you have a higher SES rate and you're not dealing with some of these other obstacles of educational attainment that higher income families have to face. Something that was fascinating to me, though, is that GDP per capita only explains about 16% of the country level variations in financial literacy. So, living in a rich country doesn't make you financially literate, essentially. And that's one of the arguments that I've heard over the years, is that when you have access to lots of financial resources, then you're going to learn more about that. And we've seen that that's not really the case here. So I'm going to skip this slide and go back. So if I click this link, nefe.org/research, Laura, can you see this on the screen? Okay, thank you. So if you go to nefe.org/research, or if you just go to the homepage, there's this little thing here you can see that click research, and you can scroll down and see these things. So this study I was just talking about with the PISA data is right here. And if you click that, it will take you to a description of the study and then the executive summary or the full research report. Some of you may be more interested in the full details of the report and the statistics. And then the executive summary is sort of the nice glossy version of that, the media-friendly version, practitioner-friendly version of those documents. We also have our recent polls that we have funded, some of the Harris polls. And then this ongoing research projects, I wanted to talk about that for just a moment. These are the studies that aren't finished or just finishing right now, and we haven't publicly released the findings. But I wanted to show you this as a teaser of what's to come, so that you know what's coming down the pike, especially if you have a particular interest or some of these findings will influence your work directly. You can kind of see when it's going to be complete. And when it says schedule for completion, that usually means within 3 or 4 months of that, everything is finished and available. So one of these I think some of you may find fascinating is the social influences on financial decision making, this one here. It's at Duke University, and it's looking at how do you evaluate how social influences like social norms, friends and family shape your financial literacy and decision making within adolescents and young adults. They're doing some functional MRI scanning on this project, and they're thinking about this sense from eye tracking and what's going on with people and how they're influenced in the ways that they make decisions on spending. They actually have a mobile lab on a big giant bus that drives around North Carolina and will go to things like soccer tournaments and county fairs to get participants to finish up the MRI section of this. Another study is at the University of Kansas and looking at building financial self-efficacy in low-income young children. NEFE has never really funded a big project or any project really looking at young children, kindergarten, first and second grade, and looking at the effects of financial education and child savings accounts, and then financial education by itself, and then maybe those that get nothing. And we're looking at the instance of parent engagement and student outcomes. And that'll be finishing up this summer. That's a largely qualitative study. The next one, Untangling the Determinants of Retirement Savings. This is looking at how life events such as losing a job, getting married, and then the differences in income levels within the quintiles of different incomes, what is happening with retirement savings balances, and how do these life events like getting laid off or getting sick or getting married or becoming disabled, how does that affect retirement savings? And a lot of those findings have started to be released as we have found them, because there's a huge interest in this. We've gotten a lot of interest in the media on this topic, and seeing what that happens. And the thing that came out of this, they had access to Social Security data, SIPS data, all kinds of really robust numbers to look at, is that the average person is going to experience 4 of these major life events, like losing a job over their lifetime, and the impact, the actual quantitative impact that has on your retirement savings is interesting. And I think that'll be really helpful as people think about their local programming, specifically if you're doing workshops on retirement savings. We have another study coming out of Ohio State that's looking at youth debt, college and family background, and thinking about what's happening with young adults. They're specifically going to look at community college students, low-income students, and youth who experience financial problems. The A-plus study, many of you are familiar with that began with students who started at the University of Arizona in the fall of 2007. We've been following these folks ever since. We're about 10 years in now, and the latest findings from that will be released. They're finishing the project now. We'll probably release the data in April for Financial Literacy Month. I just talked a little bit about the George Washington study. I gave you actually a sneak peek that's not even fully available yet. And then 2 other studies, one at the University of Rhode Island, Stephen Atlas, and then many of you know Professor Jing. He is also involved in this project, Jing Zhao, but they're looking at financial literacy decay and how does that improve, and how do you improve financial behaviors over time for young adults. And one of the things that we have found, specifically from a meta-analysis that we funded a few years ago, is that financial literacy decays over time, like financial knowledge will decay, or positive financial behaviors will decay over time, depending on how long ago that you learned the information. And they're actually looking at ways, how does confidence play into that, and how do you mitigate that decay? So this is a good study to help us understand the so what, the next steps after financial education, and how do you mitigate the decay of financial literacy, but also how does confidence play into that, and how do you offset the overconfidence in a way that to be more realistic to what people can and can know and then apply and do in their life. Lastly, financial capability and asset building. So we're actually funded a study of social workers and how they reach millions of households. The social work community is becoming more and more interested in financial literacy and how that social workers can actually help their clients become financially literate. And so they're doing a big survey of social work professors all across the country, and then thinking about how do you actually integrate financial capability, financial literacy, and asset building as part of the overall work of social workers. And I think that'll be a very telling, a very fascinating study for that field in particular, specifically helping social workers have the tools to empower their clients to know where to go get better information and more information. So back to the PowerPoint slide. Oh, this is the wrong one, sorry. When I go back, now, just a couple of minutes. That's a lot to throw at you. I know that's a lot of information to digest, but I'm hoping that you'll go back and take the time to kind of read through these studies and then pull out what's helpful to you. I wanted to give about 3 minutes update here on what's coming down the pike at NEFE. Some of you may know we launched an entire series of workshops last year that are focused on retirement. We're actually adding 2 more to that to complete the series. But that series of workshops is built upon the information that's on NEFE's My Retirement Paycheck website. We felt that it was important to create a series of workshops that are driven toward outcomes, that have learning objectives with them, that are focused on retirement, so that any of you who are doing local programming that are specifically looking at retirement planning and the aspects of retirement planning, we have created some really good turnkey workshops that you can use specifically for that. Now, many of you know financial workshop kits already, and there's all kinds of great topics in there, but we wanted to do a whole series on retirement. I'll show you a quick view of that site so that you can see what it looks like and how it's organized. I will note that financial workshop kits, where this series lives, is going through a major redesign right now. So within a couple of months, this website will be a lot more user-friendly and will look completely different. But in the meantime, you see these 8 retirements here. And when you click these topics and see the workshops, you will get the presentation materials, the additional resources, and then frequently asked questions. And if you click presentation materials, we asked you to give us some information because we're trying to track how many people use these. But then you can click over and see all of these things here that you can use, vetted materials that you can use right then. And that includes a ready-to-go PowerPoint. All you have to do is put in your logo and put in your own information for what you wanted to make it locally relevant. Also, Smart About Money. Many of you may know that our website, Smart About Money, has been redesigned in 2 ways. Number 1, we got a new website, a much more user-friendly website. And number 2, we added courses for adult learners, for consumers who just wanted to get more depth and build more proficiency within a lot of topics. And some of you, actually, Barb is one of our subject matter experts who's helped us refine these topics and make sure that everything is relevant and timely and helpful to the consumer. But I wanted to show you the new website real quick and then give you a preview of the new courses that are coming. Right now on Smart About Money, there's all kinds of great things on here, calculators, quizzes, things that are good. And then we have a lot of topics like short articles, introductory articles, people who need tips about things, people who just go to a search engine like Google and say, how to pay for Christmas debts. And it'll come up, and then there's these nice, 200 and 300 word articles that focus on that. And that's what Sam has always done well. But what we've added is our courses. So we've got Money Basics sort of as a primer, as an introduction to personal finance. And it starts with these key topics that you see here: spending and saving, credit and debt, insurance, investing, and employment. And each of these are good overviews of these particular topics. And then we have these in-depth courses that, actually, let me go back to the home page here. So the call to action is Money Basics or choose your course, which is a more in-depth one. Let me click the My Housing Plan. The Money Basics and the housing are all designed the same way, so you can actually track your progress. You can go through each of these topics, and it walks you through the process of housing. Should you buy a house? Should you do an apartment? Should you stay with your parents 6 months to help save? It helps guide you through this process of what all you need to be considering when you're buying a house. And we've got the emergency planning for emergencies, housing, and transportation. What we're adding in the coming months is financial well-being, and that should be posted in early February. Retirement should be posted by late spring. Life events and transitions will be posted in midsummer. And then by the end of the year, we hope to have career and health and wellness. And then that will fully stock up our courses for SAM so that any adult consumer who wants to learn more about any of these topics can do a self-guided experience and get to good quality information. And then we also link to others who provide additional information or activities or ways to think through this, and some of that would be from some of you. The health and wellness is kind of up in the air, to be honest, because if there's any major changes to the Affordable Care Act, commonly known as Obamacare, if I'm assuming that's probably going to change, if that changes, then we need to create resources that are capturing what the current landscape is. So it's possible that one may get pushed to 2018 depending on what happens. But in the meantime, these other courses are available. And lastly, Cash Course, which is our college website. We have 1,037, I think, colleges now using Cash Course. We're completely redesigning that website, and it will be, hopefully, fingers crossed, launched by July, so that all the users have time to work through the new site and get to know it before school starts at the universities across the country. We're completely redesigning the website and the experience, and we're also adding depth and adding information so that if you wanted to do a course or a series of workshops on campus, we're creating some roadmaps for you to how do you use NEFE materials and how do you combine those with your own if you wanted to do some more in-depth experiences on your college campus. Again, this was a lot. I apologize for throwing so much at you. Now we have about 15 minutes for Q&A. Do I need to give you control back, Laura?
I think I can. Can people hear me if I have to turn off mute? Can you hear me, Billy?
Yeah, we can hear you okay.
Okay, great. I have.
Billy, I was going to say you can keep sharing your screen if you like.
Okay.
I had a comment in the chat about someone who's using the retirement workshops and really enjoying them, and then we had a question about Spanish language materials. Billy, what if any of these are available in Spanish language?
Yeah, that's a great question, and we get asked that quite a lot. If any of you are familiar with our resource, 40 Money Management Tips, it's really geared toward college students. That is now available in Spanish. We're working really hard at NEFE to revise things and put them in Spanish. The next on the list is the Your Spending, Your Saving, Your Future, and this is a big PDF document that's on Smart About Money. Those two we're working toward. The translating to Spanish is, we could probably do a few more things quickly, but as we're revising these things, we're waiting to do it when it's time to do the new version. Instead of updating an old document that's probably going to be revised in the next 18 to 24 months, we're just waiting, and as we revise those, we're doing it then. There's no immediate plan to make a Spanish version of websites, but we are actually looking at that for Cash Course because a lot of our schools, a lot of our community colleges in California, for example, have a lot of Spanish-speaking students. So we're looking at ways to make that possible, but we don't have a lot of other resources yet. But we're getting there slowly but surely.
I mean, the other thing I wanted to jump in with is that, sort of as a plan B for folks. I know PowerPoint has some internal resources or tools that you can do that will translate from English to Spanish, so that would be an option for folks. And then internally for things like Chrome and Firefox, there's some translation tools there too. So
yeah, good point.
That could be an option for folks.
Thanks, Mark. I appreciate that. Other questions, put them in the Q&A. I see we have some things popping up. What life events have been shown by the recent NEFE research to affect retirement planning the most?
Job loss, illness, and divorce. And those full findings will be on our website very soon, probably within the next 3 or 4 weeks.
Okay. What else? Other questions? Just feel free to put those in the Q&A or in the chat. And while we're waiting, you can have just a few more minutes if you want to submit another question, but I'll go ahead and let you know what we have coming up in our webinars. February 22nd, we have Lauren Jones, who's going to kind of do a recap of what we've had with America Saves so far this America Saves campaign season, and talk about continuing to work with America Saves and Consumer Federation in upcoming months throughout the year. And we've had a question about the slides. We've had a couple of questions about the slides from the Q&A and from the chat. So slides from today, I will post those, make those available to you through eXtension Learn. So that's the February, told you the February 22nd, same time, same station webinar for the community practice. In March, we're going to be talking about Money Smart and some other materials. April is going to be positive psychology. And if you have webinar topics you would like to see, we haven't scheduled May through November yet, so there are still opportunities to get in any recommendations that you have that you'd like to see in our community practice webinars. I want to thank Billy again. Barbara has one more comment. Share the benefits of saving, create a 1 minute. Oh, great. Yes, Barb, thanks so much for reminding. And you can see the link in the chat there that Barbara sent to the video I'm saving contest that's going on. So great opportunity for us to participate in, post, share, tweet to our clients around the country in your states and your local areas. So again, any upcoming suggestions that you have for webinars, I'd be happy to have those. Billy, delightful as always to have you present for our community. I know that we'll be using these resources. And little shout out to Mark Locklear, our Zoom guru. Thank you so much. This would be a lot more difficult for me to do without you, Mark.
Thank you, Laura.
Thanks. I'm new to this, so Mark's been having to do a lot of hand holding the last month or so. Thank you so much. Any last minute questions or comments?
I'll just say, you know, from NEFE, Extension has been our probably longest friend and partner over the years, and we just, you know, we appreciate that relationship so much, and we appreciate the work you do. You know, you're on the ground, you're in the communities, you know what people care about, and we, you know, we value relationships like that. And as our resources are available, they're, you know, they'll always be free. They're always free to you, and we hope that they're helpful. And if you ever have recommendations on how to improve, excuse me, improve things, you know, pull me aside at meetings. Let me know, because we, you know, we want to create things that people are going to use, not things that look good, but things that look good and are useful. So, thank you.
Thank you so much, Billy. Extension and NEFE, it's very much a mutual admiration society there.
Yeah.
Well, thanks everyone for joining today, and we're going to shut down now, but we hope to see you on February the 22nd when Lauren Jones will be talking to us about America Saves. Thanks for joining today.
Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.